Welcome to this special episode of the ET Stand podcast. Now, you're probably wondering why a Cronulla Sharks fan podcast would invite Ryan Hoffman to be their first NRL player appearing as a guest on the show. Last week, following an interview Ryan did on the Ruck Infringement podcast, there was a social media exchange with Hoff stemming from a comment we made onto the Ruck Infringement Instagram page promoting their podcast relating to the interview that Hoff had done with specific mention of the Melbourne Storm salary cap breaches. A very difficult and emotional charged moment in NRL history that divides fans even to this day, players and the like. It caused a slight social stir, heated debate amongst our own panel, and credit to Ryan, he has accepted our invitation to come onto the show for an open and frank discussion. Now, for those who don't remember, in 2010, then NRL Chief Executive David Gallop addressed the Melbourne Storm salary cap breaches by stating that the club had engaged in deliberate actions to circumvent the salary cap regulations, which enabled them to recruit and retain top-tier players. He emphasised that such actions provided the Storm with an unfair advantage over other teams, and consequently, the NRL imposed what can only be described as the severest penalties and sanctions, including stripping the Storm of their 2007 and 2009 premierships, 3 minor premierships, a significant fine, and a bunch of other stuff. And we're still talking about it to this day. Now, Gallen underscored the necessity of these sanctions to uphold the integrity and fairness of the competition. Now, for those regular viewers of our show, I'm big on always being keen to present all perspectives and think that we can tackle this together with Ryan and have a pretty frank conversation about it. Before we get Ryan in, I just want to say I've listened to the Ruck Infringement podcast and found Ryan to be very genuine, authentic, considered, and switched on. Despite being a Melbourne Storm player, he presents as a really, really good guy. And you don't get his sort of success in life without a whole bunch of really positive personality attributes, like the ones that I just mentioned, and a whole bunch of stuff. If you listen to the Ruck Infringement podcast, it's a terrific career retrospective of the work that Ryan had to go through to become an NRL player. It is not easy becoming an NRL player. Like every NRL player is an elite level athlete. It's difficult. So for the career that Ryan had, you can only say congratulations to him. And from listening to that podcast, I've got a new appreciation for what Ryan went through personally. Taking the 2009 grand final as an example, Ryan and his teammates played a great game of football and won the match on the night. You can't dispute that because it happened. What is in dispute, and what I want us to talk about, is how that time is presented, talked about, and remembered. The Storm didn't win the premiership. I don't believe NRL media does a good job appropriately chronicling that time. And I, like a host of other fans I've spoken with this week, have some frustration with how it's reported. Was our Insta post, and it was a post by me, and I'll pull it up on screen now. Was our Instagram post petulant? I say it probably was. Did Ryan deserve it? I would say probably not. It was from a position for me personally of frustration on the way that the Storm players, the club, and NRL media talks about it. And we're going to get the boys in. So here to talk about it is regular co-host of the ET Stand, Chris Kelly, who has the best connection with other NRL fans. And, of course, Melbourne Storm legend, a former Australian player and New South Wales member of the 2014 winning team, Ryan Hoffman. Well, let's get them in. Fellas, hello. Welcome.
G'day. Thanks for having me.
Mate, pleasure. Ryan, I'm sure 2 weeks ago you didn't wake up thinking, you know what? I really want to go on a Cronulla fans podcast. That is just going to be the pinnacle of my career. Ryan, why did you accept our invitation to come on? And thank you.
Well, look, first of all, you asked me. It wouldn't have happened otherwise. But look, the discussion that we had through sort of social media, I felt the need to respond. I don't think it was as petulant as how you sort of made it.
I think mine was.
Yeah, no, but that's what I'm saying. I don't think it was. Basically, I suppose what made me want to respond to you is the fact that you mentioned move on. And we, as old Melbourne Storm people from around that era, we tend not to go around telling everyone about the salary cap thing. We only respond to questions and respond to interviews, and that's exactly what I did. I responded to a question on an interview. I gave my opinion on it, and everyone is entitled to their opinion. And in other conversations I've had with people, the most important thing I think is that people shouldn't get what they think their opinion is mixed up with what actual fact is. and start claiming what their opinion is actually true when they have no basis for their beliefs or claims.
How do you feel from a career perspective? And credit to the ruck infringement guy. You go on for a 1 hour podcast, and then 7 minutes of the chat is about the salary cap, and then that's what Kit called out. It's a terrific story. Like that must just do your head in that's what gets talked about, or can you handle it?
Well, look, I can handle it. I mean, it happened sort of 15 years ago. We handled it at the time, and I can still handle it to this day. Look, it happened. Let's not deny about it. And the one thing that we've never sort of said is that the wrong thing wasn't done. The wrong thing was done by the club. As players, we got let down. We got let down by management. We got let down by the upper end who made calls. What they thought. I don't know why it was thought, but they made the calls, and us as players, we got let down because there is nothing. I know there's been a lot of talk about guys get given boats and all that sort of stuff. Like I never saw GI's boat. You know what I mean? Like I never got a brown paper bag. Everything that we thought we were doing, we thought was signed off from above us, and as players, we got our contract, what we agreed to. That's what we were getting paid.
And you earned that. And you earned that contract, right? Like the agreement you made with the Melbourne Storm at the time, you felt would have been a fair representation. I guess how do you react? Like when you found out the news and you realized the severity of it, like I'd be filthy. Like you just must, like who were you angry with? Like who are you punching the wall saying, God damn it. Like what happens there? How do you process that?
Well, the initial thought was just disbelief. Like it was because there was no sort of feeling that you could have, just like disbelief that number one that could happen, number two that it did happen, the punishment and everything like that. And then when days came on, we sort of understood what happened, and I think that is a key. We just got told what had happened. There was no due process. There was no fronting of an argument. There was no sort of explanation being done. There was no discussion with David Gallop. There was no one coming down from anyone, to be quite honest, besides someone from News Limited, John Hardigan, that came down and basically tore us to shreds as players and coaching staff. So we got no help whatsoever from the NRL. We got no explanation whatsoever from the NRL. The only explanation we got was that got given to us from when Craig basically told us what had happened. And
when he pulls you in from the training paddock and says, "Don't take your boots off, run straight in," and then he's like,
this has happened, boys." And then it was like, how, why, what did we do wrong? How did we, what sort of happened? And then it sort of came out in the last couple of days. But look, in the months that went by, you sort of realised, well, hang on, where's the due process in this? You know what I mean? Like, where's the day in court, so to speak? And I'm not denying that the club did something wrong, but the fact that decisions got made in 3 or 4 days, that on the severity, and not each individual breach wasn't taken into account on its own. Like
because the different breaches were 2006 with $300,000 over the cap. 2007 is 459, and then 2008 and 2009 it starts getting pretty juicy. Now the cap was a modest $4.1 million in 2009, which compared to the cap today, goodness me, Ryan, you bloody lucked out. You should have played 15 years later, mate. What? That's a bummer.
Well, the cap my first year was $3 million.
Yeah, goodness me.
Anyway,
so hold on, you missed Super League and you missed the salary cap. Now you really didn't time that.
Yeah, bloody oath.
Chris, do you think that NRL fans can differentiate the position of players and the club from this incident? Are fans blaming Ryan Hoffman, or are they saying, the Melbourne Storm club are the problem?
I think that's the hardest part for players like Ryan who played in that era, or the guys in those teams, because, and as Ryan mentioned before, they obviously went on to make success after that. Like, Cameron Smith's come out defendant Billy Slater, and they've had success post the salary cap scandal. So, no, it's hard because I think, like Ryan said, no one's come down to representative or given him a chance. And so, obviously, Craig said, let's go out as a group and front the media together. And that's then tarnished as like an arrogant stance against the fans. Like, when Ryan came out and sort of, you stood behind Craig as a team and things like that. But that was just your solidarity at the time to sort of to back your club and do the right thing. and then people look at it the wrong way and get rubbed up the wrong way. And like you said, it's been drip fed to us. Like, we don't really know the ins and outs and who investigated it, who found out what happened, who was spending what, who was signed to what. It just comes out as rumors and things like that. So it's hard because like we said, and David and I discussed this before having you on at length. Like, the problem is you played in that time that you did, Ryan, and you get tarnished with that brush. Like, you can't just delete your whole career out of that because you achieve things. You play for New South Wales, you play for Australia, you played in those big semi-finals, and you guys were out just doing your job that you were paid to do, or what you wanted to do in a career, and all of a sudden you just said, "Nah, too bad, it's all gone." So it's hard for people to differentiate.
It is, but I look, the success the club had, especially the next year and the year after that, so I sort of reaffirmed to us within the group that we know we didn't win premierships on the back of salary cap breaches. We knew the success came about from the hard work that we sort of did, and you got to remember too, the players that were in that sort of era. We didn't buy international players. There was one player that came down to the club during my whole time in Melbourne Storm in 16 years.
Can I challenge you on that, Ryan?
And that was Michael Crocker. Go for it.
There's a benefit in incumbency. So on the Ruck Infringement podcast, you talk at length about the benefits of the Melbourne Storm system and how being in that system for a long time gives you a whole bunch of value. And so when you compare the 2009 Storm team versus the Eels team, the Eels don't get the chance to up. And so the salary cap extra money that you've got gives you a chance to retain a couple of players. And so it's whilst you didn't go and recruit, it's not like we can say, oh, if Parramatta have got an extra $1 million in the salary cap, they've got Brett Kamali at halfback. That's not what the Storm got to do. They got to recruit and retain a couple of extra players. And that makes a big difference. And so the point I would make to you is that while, yes, you did train harder, the analogy I got given by a Parramatta fan and a smart one at that is that the competition is played under the rules of the salary cap. And unfortunately for you, you were playing for a team that had a whole bunch of benefits and advantages because they had some under rules that the Parramatta gang didn't get. And so therefore it's like you've got a gun at a knife fight. And so it's an unfortunate, and your point is, well, we didn't need the gun.
Yeah.
You're saying we had a gun, but we didn't need it. That's my analogy. Does that make sense? Can you give us a response to that?
No, it does. Look, and it's a very, very, very valid point. And as I said, we're not denying that we didn't breach the salary cap. We did. The evidence was there. Like it was plain as day. But I suppose how we get frustrated was, I'm going to go back to it, the sort of due process on how this all came about, because there have been other teams that have breached the cap for more than us for 1 year. Like there was I think the Warriors got done, and all that sort of stuff.
Bulldogs got done, obviously.
The Bulldogs got done. They took 4 points off the Warriors. They couldn't take premierships off them because they didn't win it. They hadn't won anything.
The Raiders in the 90s, Hoff, also had some problems around the salary cap too.
There was, but even the Bulldogs. Bulldogs lost all their points for that season. So because they couldn't take anything else off them. So was it fair to take off the sort of premierships and minor premierships and all that sort of stuff just because we had won them? Or was it part of should the punishment being attributed to the crime each individual year? Like, that's the type of discussion that would have been had in a due process sort of scenario.
Well, I guess it is.
I was going to make it of that Bulldogs team. Like I remember David and I were harsh fans against the Dogs at 0-2. They won, I think, 17 straight, absolutely on fire. And like you said, they got stripped and played for 0 points in 0-3. And then 0-4 come out and win the comp. We're pretty much the same team. Like their punishment was a slap on the wrist, whereas you guys was pretty harsh. But maybe that was their way or the NRL's way, or go at the time going, you know what, we've had enough of this. Enough teams have done it. Let's really punish someone. And unfortunately, like you said, it was you guys that copped a whole harsh punishment because you were successful at that time.
Is the salary cap rule the right rule? Like, Ryan, you gave a really good answer on the Ruck Infringement podcast. You were asked, what rule would you change now? And your answer is really good. And I agree with your answer. And as a clickbait style thing to give our Ruck Infringement guy a plug, go listen to it. You can hear Ryan Hoffman's answer on what rule he would change. The salary cap rule, taking your Melbourne Storm cap off and being an NRL fan, is it the right rule and should we have it? And we can discuss other sports.
Look, it has to happen because the state of the game at the moment, we need to protect the clubs. So we need it to because we need to protect clubs and they're not spending money they don't have. Because otherwise, clubs will be folding left, right, and centre. If it was challenged in a court, it'd get thrown out in 5 minutes for
Well, it's a restraint of trade, isn't it?
Restraint of trade. But it's what's been agreed upon, and I think for our game to thrive, and if we want a 20-team comp in the future to compete with AFL, I think we need to sort of have it. But I think the way salary cap is done is now is a lot smarter than what it's done previously with third-party payments and everything like that. Surprisingly, it was the third-party payments that got us in trouble, which are now legal.
Hey, you just didn't pick the right freaking era to play, did you?
I really didn't. No, I didn't.
You really blew it. So, Chris, talk to us about other leagues that have got salary caps in place and the differences of them as being a keen sports fan.
Yeah, well, obviously most sports do now. So obviously Boldo knows the EPL's just brought in a hard salary cap. They're going to try to
that does my head in.
Yeah, so you haven't got your Manchester City winning premiership after premiership after premiership because they've got the Saudis just pouring money in there, or a United or a Chelsea. And as you know, Boldo, being a Forest fan, you're all of a sudden in the top four because, you know, it's a bit more of an even playing field. The other ones are the NBA has a soft salary cap, but they've got a salary cap, but you can obviously go into a luxury tax where you pay overs. And same as the NFL, they actually have a salary cap, but you can go overs and you get taxed on that, and you're also got to pay the money out. So most sports are aligning that way, but yeah, it's a tough one because like I totally agree with the restraint of trade. I think it's horrible. Like I'd like to see a player like Reece Walsh earn $1 million from Nike, but it should be regulated by someone, right? The Broncos are paying your wage out of this bank balance, but Reece, if you want to go off the field and get $1 million, go and get $1 million because it just, you shouldn't be limited on what you can earn throughout your career. As Ryan knows, we're just saying, you know, Boldo's making jokes of it, but it should be a factor of like, if Ryan had the opportunity to go out and earn, you know, $1 million from Nike, he should be able to take it and then set up for life. Whereas, you know, just because you played in that era, it doesn't matter. Like, you know, we've talked about older guys who played in those eras and they said they had to work a second job and things like that. So, yeah, it's a tough one.
Yeah, and look, we're certainly league players certainly can't cry poor because on average they're earning a lot more than
well, the top tier ones are, Ryan. The lower tier, the average NRL player plays between 26 and 40 NRL matches as 3-year career. That's an incredible amount of sacrifice if you're, you know, a 3-season player. Like,
well, the spread is a lot better. The spread is a lot better, and I certainly like the revenue share model that the game sort of has too, because there's a lot of incentive there for that revenue share, ensuring that we're picking up the bottom players. But look, if the game's made, because in the early 90s the game was making squillions and the players were getting nothing. So it's finally at a stage where it's sort of even. But look, to going back, look, we do need a cap to protect the clubs from themselves, I feel.
Because otherwise they just go and spend themselves stupid, which is why the Premier League and the English clubs have got the financial fair play, because they're only allowed to spend as much as they're earning, so they can't get caught out. So there's a Newcastle United, for example, has a rich owner, but they can't spend more because they're just not making enough. And so then there are tricks that get around that. The EPL has an interesting example, Ryan, to your point of how quickly the Melbourne Storm one was handed down. Manchester City have got, 115 charges against them. And so a whole bunch of fans have got frustration, and that is hanging over their heads. So I can understand the speed there. Most recently, we saw in the NFL, the Kansas City Chiefs were beaten by the Philadelphia Eagles. And the Kansas City Chiefs, unfortunately, they had a really weak offensive line, and they weren't able to retain Orlando Brown, who's a Pro Bowl left tackle that went to the Bengals, and they had another guy that they drafted in the 6th round, Andrew Wiley, who would have been a member of the O-line. So you can admit, Ryan, there's benefits. Like, you got to admit, if you can skirt the salary cap a little bit, you got to say you get some benefits there, don't you?
Yeah, look, and I think everyone knows that the cap, how well it was policed throughout its time, like. It's the worst kept secret in rugby league that people were sort of breaking the salary cap, and then it did happen and all that sort of stuff. It was almost sort of a joke within the game.
The way the media presents it, like the Matty John show and the Roosters in the brown paper bags, I don't like that. Is that appropriate? Should that happen, and should we accept it?
Well, yeah. It's not because it's Tara and Tara with a brother. Whether or not that happened in the past, I don't know. And I'm sure in this day and age, it's way too dangerous to sort of make those sort of accusations and everything like that. But the funniest thing that came out after our salary cap issue is that Schubert came down and looked over everything, and the only thing that he discovered was we had a player that had received a car outside of his contract from another club. That was
Well, I know,
outside of the cap.
Yeah,
Like,
I know
so
firsthand the Cronulla Sharks had a salary cap issue in 2015, and that was actually an error, just a clerical error, and they just forgot to process something. I won't, though it was, if you go Google it, you can find who the player was. And Ryan, you call out in the podcast, and this is one thing I've found. The margins in these matches, they're like outrageously small. And so, you know, you call out the match of the 2009 grand final, and I know I'm focusing in on that one. But boy, what a match! And so, you know, the moments of just having a slightly higher quality player and that ability for you guys, because when Fui scores and they're down by 6, you've got a stronger team. You can go jag the field goal. Like the margins are just so fine. Like I don't know, how'd you? They are.
Well, why? So, but the question is why hasn't every team that's gone outside the cap won a premiership? You know, like it's like there has been teams that have you know, breached the salary cap but haven't been high up there. I remember that the latest one that I can remember from a few years ago. They took a very long time. I think the Parramatta Eels had some issues with the salary cap a couple of years ago, and that took nearly 12 months for it. For it to
all that was of a nines tournament trophy was about it. So,
yeah.
No, but
all factors that go into winning a premiership, though, aren't there? We did a video a couple of months back, a retrospective look at the quality of the halfbacks, and so the quality of the halfbacks, you need one of the top 3 halfbacks in the competition to win the starters. And so if you don't have one of them, and the greatest respect to, and Ryan, you can chuckle along with me, but I landed on that since 1980 is that I said that maybe Chad Townsend, Craig Polymounter, and Shane Perry could not be considered as the good halfbacks as maybe Ricky Stewart, Alan Langer, and Peter Sterling. And so when you go through and you look at the list of the halfbacks that have won, they're all typically the second or third, first best halfbacks. And so then, all right, well then what else have you got with that? You've got a big forward pack, you've got a strong spine, you've got up-and-coming players, so there's a whole bunch of other attributes that just going into win a premiership. And I think that's your point, isn't it? Is it's not just that one factor.
Yeah. No, that's it. Like, you know, money doesn't make you play better. But it gives you an opportunity to have a team to play better, but to come down to the individual, it doesn't make you sort of play better. But which goes to show that why every team that's won that breached the salary cap hasn't won a premiership.
Chris, pulling it back to you, you know I'm going to ask you this question. The NRL fans and differentiating the way that the Melbourne Storm club acts to the way the players, and you call out a specific incident with the Storm's celebration of their 25-year anniversary. What frustrates the fans about the way that it's sometimes reported and talked on, the salary cap breaches?
It's like Ryan said at the start, you know, this was something that happened such a long time ago, but obviously, Ryan, you could probably speak on it. It was the Storm celebration, or the 25-year celebration last year, where obviously a tweet went out from the social media team and it sort of got hosed down and then defended. It was sort of putting up that 07-09 trophies as part of the premierships. But yeah, it's look, we've gone through it as well, obviously, with our 2014 scandal and things. So we know what it's like to get sort of dragged through the mud and tarnished and other fans yelling at us and things. But I suppose out of that, how do you feel as a playing group? Like, you guys obviously, without, you know, we're not trying to get a screen grab out of this or anything, but like, obviously you guys as a team, we won the comp. That's what we did. We don't care what you guys say, or is it more we've got to try and tread carefully of how we say it?
Look, we won that game. I was there. Yep. It happened. I scored a try. Yeah, you know. Yep. So we want to celebrate the group of players. So to sort of totally put a line through that and saying that those teams never existed, they never did anything, I don't think will be right. 100%, I understand the frustrations of other clubs, teams we beat going into those games, teams we beat in the grand final, especially sort of fans. but I suppose that's more for us internally as a team. If someone asked me what happened in that game 2009, I'll say we won the grand final. I was there. I remember that sort of feeling. So it's something that the club. Yeah, I can certainly see from many different perspectives, but for me, I was there. It happened. I want to celebrate with those group of players that I'd spent a long time training and playing with, and closest friends and all that sort of stuff. I don't want to forget that group of players. I want to celebrate with them.
History, Ryan, is littered with examples of victors trying to rewrite history of the wrongs that happened. I won't go into and won't draw analogies between, bad moments in history and this incident, because whilst it is sport, my take, the Melbourne Storm is obviously a very powerful club with extremely influential ex-players. And from our purview, that's sometimes what attempts to get done. And so, like you've admitted here, you can understand why fans get angry. And what I want us to think about is we shouldn't gloss over what happened because it's a little bit uncomfortable for the person involved to accept what happened. Because what happened to you sucked. Like we all agree on that. And so it's awful. And listening to the pod, I totally get it. But we need to be cognizant of the fact that, celebrating it in some way and just brushing it aside and not being respectful for what happened and understanding. Like, we need to make sure this salary cap thing doesn't happen to anyone else. And by the media picking their moments of, oh, yep, here's the Storm champion club. Oh, no, salary cap cheats. And the Sharks cop it as well. As, it's unwinningest team in history, scandals. I just think it needs some careful consideration. And that's the big frustration. And that's why you got the post from me initially of that petulant post is I just feel sometimes it's not appropriate how we act. And we need to be really considered and respectful of that incident. And it just can't be, a 23-year-old social media manager just deciding that, hey, I'm going to post up that the Storm won those premierships and not taking a considered position. Do you agree with that sentiment, or you think I'm off the mark?
Yeah. Look, but I suppose it's knowing that what you're going to do, there's going to be backlash to it, and you need to be able to front up for it.
Yeah, okay? That's fair.
You need to be if you're going to do something, you have convictions about what you do, and I feel the club has sort of done that. One thing we need to sort of realise, like this, a lot of people saying, well, Lance Armstrong handed back all his sort of so and so. Making a conscious decision to take drugs in an individual sport is totally different to players being let down by the people up top that were making the decisions and deciding where all the money was going, and the group of players that had no idea what was going on. So I think when people make that analogy, we're talking about apples and sort of oranges and that there. I think it was I don't think the NRL, I don't think the salary cap, the decisions they made had the intended effect, because there has been breaches after that.
Well, that's classic rugby league, isn't it? Like, that happens every single time. That you change the rule to something like this, and then suddenly, the coaches and I might accuse the Storm of being the best at taking advantage of any rule changes, but it's just a matter of, and this is my frustration with society, is that people don't think through the consequences. Oh, if I do this, actually what's going to happen? So playing that out. I'd put a slide together on what I think is the closest comparison of a team globally who went through something similar. So Juventus in 2006, for those that don't know, was a Serie A soccer team that played in the top flight, has a storied history. Their most notable player is that Australians would be familiar with is Alessandro Del Piero. They were found to have manipulated match referees, the officials, at like a senior level. And so what would be frustrating for the players in that team that won a whole bunch of championships is that they didn't know that the match officials had been compromised. And so as far as Alessandro Del Piero was concerned, is that he played in a game, he scored a goal and he won. And so he could certainly share that same frustration. The Juventus team at the time was stripped of the titles and also demoted to the lower league, and they lost a whole bunch of players, including Zlatan Ibrahimovic, Cannavaro, and No, Cannavaro stayed and Del Piero stayed, and they also lost Patrick Vieira and a couple of others. That's the closest I can find. I don't know of others that come close. Yeah, do you think the Italians got it right and how they dealt with that one, Ryan? Sorry, tough question. I should have prepped you on that one.
No. That's all right. But look, how they sort of did it. But where are Juventus now? So the whole thing was.
They won a whole bunch of competitions later. They were pretty pumped up.
Yeah, but so does it? Did they need to do stuff like that, like do the referees and all that sort of thing? You know what I mean?
Ryan, if you were the executive producer of Fox League, and you were doing the screen details for Cooper Cronk, do you put on a 6 premiership time winner or 4 premiership time winner? You're the executive producer, and you're trying to educate, you're trying to placate and entertain and be thought of amongst all NRL fans. I'm going to put you in that exact scenario. What do you do? Is he a 6 or a 4?
I'll always say a 6. And I know people won't agree, and I know people think I'm in denial and everything like that, but I will always say a 6.
Do you think it's asking for trouble though by not?
Probably. But if people ask me how many premierships I won, I'll always say 3, and I've got the rings at home to show it.
And you went through those instances.
Yeah, that I've been through it plenty of times, and a lot of people will disagree with what I'm saying, as I said, and saying I'm arrogant and saying I don't get it, and Melbourne Storm, what's wrong with rugby league, and they're Hitler and all that sort of stuff. But in the end, and I'm sure anyone else who went through that same situation will say the exact same thing, because there's just a deeper level to it.
But I just say, I think one of my co-hosts, Lath, is most upset is that you guys weren't able to play for competition points, let alone in the semi-final series in 2010, which led to our rival St George Illawarra.
This is all your fault, Hoffman.
So he always wants an asterisk
next to
2010 premiership because you guys weren't in competition for points in semi-finals.
You are the reason. You bloody Melbourne Storm people are the reason why we got to put up with the St George Illawarra premiership. You bastards. Why did you do it to us, Ryan?
I know. Would you believe after I was in it's the first time I've actually had a chance to go on holiday in September that year, because we weren't in the final. So I was actually at Oktoberfest, and someone told me that St George had just won the grand final. I just
I went out to Dubbo, took the family to Dubbo for the weekend. I didn't want to see an absolute bar of it because
you didn't want to hang around.
We hadn't that stage, so we were quite jealous of that as well. So.
Yeah, I don't think people understand either just how tough it was playing for 18 games for no points. And but
I guess you're putting your body on the line for no reason, really, aren't you? It's not like every NRL match. There's a reason why NRL players, especially the forwards, are throwing up into bins beforehand, because the intense, what happens to your body. Like it's not a game of football. You're going for a run in the park.
No, pride's an amazing thing, though, isn't it?
Well,
that's pride in yourself.
Last question on the. Oh, you go, Chris.
You know what? We'll throw our hands up. You guys can win by 80 points. Who cares? Like, we're not playing for points. It was hard for us fans to watch as well, because we knew we were going to get the 2 points, but we still had to go out there and play a game, and possible injuries, suspensions, and things like that. So credit to you guys for going out there and actually having a bit of pride in it.
Yeah, it was a very difficult time for the whole competition, I've got to admit.
Last question on the salary cap, and then we'll talk about notable Sharks players that you paid against, Hoff. And I've got a feeling I know some of the answers. The extreme view on the salary cap is that some of the players must have known. Listening to your interview, I don't think you did know. But what I will say is, can you categorically rule it out, or is it on the board that there's a chance someone knew or they had an inkling, or should you have known? Like in hindsight, you're thinking about it. Like it's such an important rule. Should all the players be like chatting? Hey, are we over the top of this? Like, how do you respond to people that say, "Oh, the players knew"?
I'll swear on a stack of Bibles that I had absolutely no idea, and I can guarantee that a lot of my mates and guys that I was with, just to seeing their reaction when it sort of happened, there was no sheepishness, there was no sort of we've been done. It was absolute devastation, to be
It was
quite honest. And like
devastation and shock.
it was, because we all thought what we were doing was 100% legit, and everyone said, "Oh, you did know boats getting dropped off," like, but we did deals that with like third party deals that we were told were above board. We got paid our wages that we agreed to. I know a lot of guys are the same. I took unders every time I signed with the Storm. I could have got more money going elsewhere, but I never did.
Come to the Sharks, mate. You might have helped us. The Sharks ever
Yeah, I
try
did
for
it.
you, Ryan?
Couple of times, yeah. Especially in 2010, I got a call from Flano asking, because Flano had coached me in the Origin scenario and asked if I was interested in, because they knew the club was going to shed players, interested in coming to Cronulla.
It was a terrible time.
Wasn't the best time, Sharks, in 2010 and 11. We weren't that good. Hoff, when you hear Sharks players and great Sharks opponents that you faced, who comes to mind?
Yeah, look, there's quite a few guys that I spent a lot of time of my career with, and from when I was kids. I grew up with sort of Greg Bird. We came through all the rep.
We love Birdie on our show, Hoff.
Yeah, so back this is back when he was at Newcastle, when he was in Newcastle Junior, sort of then I remember seeing him make his debut in 2002 for the Sharks. Paul Gallen, obviously known for a very, very long time. I even knew him from when he was like in the junior grades and everything like that at Para. So they're guys that you come and play against for a very long time. Luke Lewis, I played against him at school, and he's a good mate of mine. Like those sort of players that we all played similar positions. We played a lot of rep football together, and guys that I had some great sort of moments again. You're coming up against playing against those guys. You know what they're like personally, so you know that bloke against you is gonna have a red hot crack. But there was some great Sharks players back in the day. Probably one of the greats, if not the greatest, Robbie Kearns.
He breaks our heart. You can't talk about Robbie Hoff on this podcast. It's just too annoying. I had his card as a child. Robbie Kearns. Why?
The old Engadine Dragons fella.
Engadine Dragons. The Engers.
Engadine Dragons, yeah. So like Russell Aiken, now coaching up at Pride. Spent a lot of time playing against him as a kid from those Cronulla days. I've actually got a funny story. When my old man was playing for the Raiders, he reckons the only time he ever had a real abuse thrown at him was when I think ET would have been very, very young, and he came across and gave ET one over the chin. And Dad reckons coming off there at would have been Caltex back then. Coming off the field at Caltex, he don't reckon he's never copped as much abuse from anywhere, even at Manly, from what he copped that night.
I think the most I think the most abused player walking off the field was probably Cam Smith when he finally got a sin bin and at Shark Park.
That was a fun night. Wasn't there something like 38 penalties or something blowing that? I remember that clear as well.
There was some crackdown there. We just had a quick little quip and that was it. Just pulled him off and we couldn't stop laughing. It was and credit to Cam, it was hilarious because he actually took his time and then didn't want to step on the field and then took one foot of the next and just took his medicine from the fans who rushed the tunnel at him. So it was hilarious.
Yeah, I remember that he ran off with his head up, and I remember him running past me as he's going off into the tunnel, and I just had a bit of a smirk to him because I thought, mate, you were going to cop an absolute hiding getting off that field.
And Hoff, Chris and I were not involved with standing over the tunnel in our beloved ET stand.
We say it.
How does Shark Park compare to other stadiums in terms of difficulty going into? Like, is it as annoying? And you're like, there's the weird wind swells and it's a weird stadium. Like, where does it rank? Do you hate it compared to other stadiums?
Okay, it depends. Are we playing at 7:30 on a Saturday night? Or are we playing at 2:00 Sunday afternoon? Because I'll play at Shark Park at 2:00 on a Sunday afternoon every day of the week.
Yeah, right. But 7:30 sucks, does it?
7:30 on a Saturday night at Shark Park. You knew it was going to be absolutely freezing. You knew there was a gale force breeze going across the field. There were some tough nights getting up for a game there when you're warming up. And sorry, it's actually when you get, because the bus had to park a long way away on the road there to walk to the ground. As you're walking down, you can just feel the wind cutting through you. But look, it was a great ground because it was so close, because it's a proper suburban sort of ground. It was brilliant. And yeah, I was actually playing for the Warriors when Shawnee Johnson scored that try on the bell, and
God, you're just brutal. Why do we have you on? That was some try though, wasn't it?
Yeah, the atmosphere then was because there's a big supporter of Warriors fans. But that was one night I sort of remember at Shark Park. But then I remember another game. I think we started in 2012 or 2013. We'd won 8 straight. And then we played Cronulla at Cronulla on a Sunday afternoon, and we got beaten by, I think we got beaten by 4. Jeremy Smith, former Storm player, scored a try from dummy half.
He did.
To break our win streak. And I remember that being a very, very loud afternoon.
Yeah.
I will
you mentioned Jeremy Smith.
I'll challenge you on a Sunday night versus a Sunday afternoon. It was Billy Slater's debut match was at Shark Park, and it was an absolutely howling wind, and it was 26-0 at half time our way. And I think who was the referee at the time?
22. It's 22, Chris.
22-0. And he said, I think this is a 24-0 wind in the second half. It was craziness. And we lost that game because Billy I think he scored a double in his debut, and the wind was for a Sunday afternoon. It was just craziness.
That was
Jeremy
Billy
Smith,
Ack's first and last game. That was nearly Billy Ack's first and last game coaching.
Yeah, wasn't it?
He was going to get sacked at halftime.
Hop, you mentioned Jeremy Smith. I don't think he's the greatest Shark Storm player ever. I've got who I think the answer is. Who do you think the answer is? Players that played for both.
Yeah, Jezza had just the right amount of grub in him. Yeah, just the right amount of grub. But the Storm Sharks player,
I think it's clear who the top one is.
Will Chambers. Will Chambers.
It's not Will Chambers because he wasn't good for both. So on our criteria, you've got to be good for both. Goodness me, poor Will Chambers. He was one of the most hated non-Sharks players at the Sharks, and he couldn't even do it as well as Ennis. See, the Sharks fans couldn't stand Ennis, and then Ennis turns up and everyone starts supporting Ennis. But even poor old Will Chambers being the Queenslander, he struggled to win us over, the poor bugger.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
All right, Chris, do you want to give me your answer? I've got what I reckon the answer is. The greatest Storm Shark.
I was going to say Jeremy Smith, unfortunately, because of what we're talking about today, ended up going to St. George in that 2010 Premiership team. So it's another sore point.
I think the greatest Shark Storm player ever who had great times with both teams is undoubtedly Tawera Nikau for mine. I think he's standout.
I'm going to go with Brett Kamali.
Oh, Brett Kamali. Yeah, he's good too. I didn't think of that. Of course.
That's the obvious answer.
Yeah, maybe it is Brett Kamali. I've got Brett Kamali. I will just show this quickly and then we'll let you go, Hoff. I've got on Tuesday night, the Sharks induct their 11 Hall of Fame players all time. The top 5, Tommy Bishop, Greg Pearce, Steve Rogers, Gavin Miller, and ET are locked in. And so it's the bottom 6 that are in question. I reckon I'm pretty close on the bottom 6. I went and analysed it. I've got Gallinson, Dane Sorensen, Peach, Rogers, Lewis, and Kamali. I think I've got 5 out of 6 correct. Hoff, any commentaries? Who would your 6 all-time Sharks on top of that be?
Yeah, I reckon you're pretty spot on there, especially Peachy, Rogers. I reckon if Preston Campbell played a bit longer too, I reckon he would have been in there with a shot too, because he did some amazing things at the Sharkies.
Yeah, he did win that. He didn't. He doesn't qualify because he didn't play long enough, and he didn't win a comp or
representative.
Yeah, so it's a real shame. Well, we blame. That's all. We're going to do another episode on what went wrong from us signing Matthew Johns. And losing Preston Campbell was the big moment that we got from that. So we'll deal with that another time. And Ryan, thanks for coming on, mate. That was entertaining. You're a great
no
bloke.
Worries.
I hope you've got a new appreciation for the frustration that that Sharks fans feel, or all NRL fans feel in general with the situation typically. And and hopefully you can understand, some positions of why you might cop a few petulant posts from time to time, and then maybe you'll have a slightly reconsidered view. But I certainly do. I'd feel sorry for you guys. It sucks what happened to you. So thanks for coming on, mate. Any last words?
Thanks. Look, it's like, you don't need to feel sorry for us. It was reality. We don't feel sorry for ourselves. That there were certain situations throughout the whole thing that we wish we handled.
We think we've lost you, Ryan. Lucky we're coming to the end of the pod. All right, well, we'll sign off there. Thank you to Ryan Hoffman for coming in for that cogent analysis and chat on the ET Stand podcast. If you're new to the channel, do hit the like and subscribe button and follow us to be notified of all of our upcoming videos. We've got a lot happening. We've got the Hall of Fame next week. I'm hosting a Sharks trivia thing. Chris and I are going to Vegas. A whole bunch of other stuff coming. We're not allowed to mention that, are we, Chris? Or are you just head wobbling? Other than that, do follow us on Instagram to keep abreast of what Chris and I are up to. And again, sincere thank you to Ryan Hoffman for getting involved. That was a terrific chat. I really enjoyed that. And we'll see you guys. Hopefully the Sharks can get up against Penrith Panthers. We'll have our tips and season previews on next week's Tuesday night episode. And until then, up Cronulla.
For over 50 years, people have come to see the Sharks play. Talent, skill, speed, intelligence, elite-level athleticism. That's not these guys. Biased, one-eyed, opinionated, more often wrong than right. They make up for their complete lack of talent with pure dribble, gibberish, and enthusiasm. This is the ET Stand Podcast.